the goal for any company in Vancouver shouldn't be to be a big BC company. If you want to become a big BC company, 10 million bucks will put you on the Business of Vancouver Tech 100. You want to become a big company in the Valley, 10 million bucks. That's not even the pizza shop across the street from Apple.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to think big and you got to be aggressive.
Welcome to Afternoon Tea Podcast. I am super excited today. That is super plus excited because we have Kris Hartvigsen from Dooly joining us. Let me set this up, please, Kris. Kris Hartvigsen is the CEO and co-founder of Dooly, a sales enablement platform that collects customer information essential to close business sales. The cloud-based platform uses artificial intelligence, AI, as I said, to capture, share, and find the customer information, and with its algorithm, syncs digital notes, fields, and tasks straight into Salesforce, while providing salespeople and customer success teams with the information they need. It enables customer-facing teams to reduce time spent on administrative tasks and close sales. Kris, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kris. Nice to meet you again.
meet you is right. Meet you is right. Well, let me back up that history a little bit of a caveat. So Kris and I have a history, and in fact, a long history, one might say, because Kris and I are both graduates of South Delta Senior Secondary, grad 90 and 91, I believe.
Correct. Yeah, you failed a year, right?
I wish. I'd like to say I passed. Well, yeah, no, they couldn't separate me from David. Come on. Why would that?
No,
why would that
enough.
ever happen? Why would that ever happen? But, we do have a long history. And, I've actually been super excited about following Kris and Dooly since the early days of Dooly. And, really excited about the growth and the success you've had. And I, with my... what we call this Sun Devils. There we go. With my Sun Devil flag waving, we'll be cheering for you to be closing those $1 billion deals soon, Kris. I'll tell you that right now. So thank you for joining me today.
Again, nice to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
No, definitely. So tell you what, why don't we just do this? Tell me, when did you found Dooly? When was it founded?
Well, in my head, it was founded a lot earlier than it was actually on paper. So this is a problem that I've been exploring for a long time. I'm actually really fascinated by workflow, and I really like to dig in to understand how things should work across an organization as opposed to how they do work. We tend to work very, very differently because the systems that have been put in place are really designed for an outcome or an output, as opposed to how the information actually gets into that flow. So I started the company in 2016 and co-founded it with Justin, who I had met at Mobify, where I was doing some consulting at the time.
Oh, very nice. Well, then that actually beats my question. Was what were you doing prior? But you were at Mobify then.
Well, I was doing some consulting work there. Prior to that, I did 9 years at Vision Critical, which I think has since rebranded in the last couple of months. But yeah, I did 9 years there, basically ran international sales, lived around the world, lived in Australia, lived in the UK. And I think the genesis for the business really came out of a lot of my experiences because I was spending so much of my time chasing information and pushing information. And so when you're in sales, the thing that you don't want to do is get out of your high value mode. Your high value mode is where you want to live because frankly, your paycheck is predicated on it. So we were spending all of this time updating clunky old Salesforce and before that Dynamics, and they were all kind of the same, to be honest. And it just bothered me because I wanted to focus more on earning revenue for the business. And then I realized that when, we're closing deals around the world, National Football League, Telstra, BBC, Nestle, like some really big brands, nobody walks up to you in the hallway and says, "Hey, congrats on closing the NFL. Did you update the competitor field in Salesforce?" That conversation just doesn't happen. So it starts to make you realize that even though people want the data in the CRM, they don't want it bad enough to block you from actually closing business.
Well, that's really interesting. So is that, Well, that's really interesting. So when you're talking the sales, was that for the previous companies, or is that from your learnings through CRMs from Salesforce and all that? That was with your previous work where you started realizing,
Yeah.
hey, this is something that we really
Yeah.
really can benefit from.
Absolutely. So at Vision Critical, again, I was, I was top performer, triple quota. I was
Hmm.
like absolutely nutting my number, and then I started running teams. There was the same thing where teams were just crushing it, and it didn't matter whether it was the UK or Australia where I was living. I lived in both geographies, or in North America where I was first boots on the ground for the US. Again, really just hitting our number in stride. So what I realized is we had a pretty good system. My system back in the day was pen and paper. Like I just had a really good organized notebook, but that whole world has gone digital.
Hmm.
Everybody takes notes digitally now. And your notes are not what was said per se on the call. Your notes are what you need to do. It's your plan. It's your plan of
Hmm.
action. And that was really the thing that bothered me is, when you looked at the CRM, it was all about uh, basically looking at a giant filing cabinet, right? So somebody took Salesforce and threw it up into a cloud and said, here you go. This is the new filing cabinet for you. Put your stuff in the filing cabinet. And so you always had to go over to the filing cabinet, open the drawer, find the file within the file, fill it in, and then close the drawer and hope that the drawer stayed closed. And with Salesforce, that was never really the case, and still to this day isn't. So I got just frustrated as all get out with that because,
Hmm.
again, my paycheck was based on my performance. So I stayed in my high value mode as much as possible as a result of that. We tried to figure out a way with Dooly to basically keep people out of the filing cabinet, but make sure that the files were getting back there on their own.
Well, that's actually really interesting because we've only started using advanced. We don't use Salesforce. We use Hubspot. At the end of the day, same sort of idea.
Same thing.
Probably a little bit. I think Salesforce probably has a lot more tools, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
but you're actually describing a problem that we kind of solve or facing ourselves right now, which is kind of intriguing me now that I'm learning more about the
Mm-hmm.
product because there's that dislocation of the information, and then because we go from sale close to and the sales close, but they never really close because there's hunters and gatherers, and you need
Yep.
that information to continue, but it goes into a totally different. We leave HubSpot at that point, and then all of a sudden we have a dislocation of our information, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm understanding where you're coming from here, and I think I need this myself. I'll just be honest with you. This is a conversation we'll have offline here. But hey, CDL, okay?
Yeah.
You took part in CDL.
Yep. I did.
Tell me a little bit about that experience.
So I think the CDL program, which stands for Creative Destruction Lab, for those that are not familiar,
Thank you.
is really designed to help create some discipline around your thinking around your business, right? So if you go in there and willfully put yourself out there to say these are my legit problems and this is legitimately what's going on, and you don't try to fake it through, because you can game anything. Let's be honest. So if you legitimately put yourself out there, you're going to walk away with, I would say, a few different perspectives on your business. Um, what did we learn from CDL? Like CDL kind of comes down to three different types of personalities that are in the program that are there to help you in one way, shape, or form. And some people are there to just provide you with cold, hard cash. They're interested in helping you by investing. That's fantastic. It's great that we have access to people who look at your business and go, okay, I really like this. I can get behind this. Here's some money. Then you have people that are there because they feel like they have the ability to coach you or guide you in a topic, whether it be finance or product or go to market or what have you. There are people that have experience and lots of hard yards behind them. And then, I mean, you're always going to have the third category, which is the one that I think is probably the least desirable, which is just the people that are there just information gathering. And certainly, that's the same with the investor world in general. I can promise you that.
Mm-hmm.
So big outcomes for us out of CDL. We made it right through to the final,
You did.
which was great. It's
Very
kind of
good.
like your survivor program, if you will.
Mm.
We ended up getting a number of people that invested in our business out of the program. And we're very grateful for that because it was the fuel that we needed to get the business rolling in the first place. And again, it just kind of made us look at some of the different things that we weren't necessarily thinking about, like, in product experience for going viral, security, and progressing business over into Europe, and a bunch of different things that today we have a pretty good foundation in because of the work that we did there. But you got to put in the hard work. If you don't put in the hard work, it's just a total waste of time, a total waste of time if you don't put the work in.
I talk to a lot of people who are not only behind the scenes, as helpers with the CDL, or people behind it, but also companies have gone through, and everyone says the same thing. It's just totally cruel. Like it is. Yep. There's nothing emotional. It is. You get cut. Like you said it perfectly. It's Survivor. And you have to be. I don't want to say bloodthirsty because you're competing, but you're not competing. You're really just doing the best you can for your whatever your business model is and all that. But I have heard such interesting and positive things that come out of it. And I think, if you can get that validation, which you clearly got, I mean, you get to the final, honestly, for those who don't understand, that is serious validation. That must have been just a deep breath of like, awesome. This is something that we can do.
That's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty cool. And again, you get lots of mentorship along the way. And it's how you leverage the mentorship that's really important for that. Not just that, but any investor source, or like you could go do YC, you could do 500, you can do any of the incubators that are out there. If you don't want to take the advice because you think you're way too smart for it, don't even bother. Don't waste your time.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, so coming out of that, is that when you took your seed round then?
We had our seed round sort of got initiated partway through, which helped us obviously to get people very interested in what we're doing. Hey, so-and-so is investing and so-and-so is investing. Well, that's great. So we had a lot of friendlies, and the friendlies just continued to accrue throughout. We took our seed round, or it's actually a pre-seed round that we took with CDL. If we want to do like relative terms, we're comparing ourselves to the US, what we raised was pretty nominal. And so we did that in, I think it was February of 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that roughly? Was that like 6 figures, 7 figures? What are we talking about?
It was a small 7-figure raise. Yeah. I think it's published at 2 million Canadian.
That's fantastic. That's honestly, that's a really, really good start. And I actually remember, I think I bumped into you just after you closed, because your office was pretty close to the one on Alberni. And it was always nice to bump into you. And like I said, just to kind of witness your success, which was freaking fantastic, I got to say.
The good old early days. It's not always easy throughout the run either.
Everyone thinks you close the money and then it's like an easy thing, but no, now you gotta, focus on another round of money. That's usually what happens.
Well, that's the funny thing. As soon as I stopped, or as soon as I was done raising, people are like, what are you going to do now? I go, raise. Perfect.
I people don't understand that. Like, I think in order to be successful is, that money is usually, it's kind of already, I won't say it's pre-spent, but you already kind of spent it 6 months back. Cause I mean, the typical, what would your next round, or have you done another round since then? Should I ask?
We might've. Yeah.
Might've. Okay. Well, what's the typical closing, should I say, then from start to end of that?
Oh, it depends. I mean, so I like talking to investors like grabbing a big tub of butterscotch ice cream. And for the most part, everybody wants to tell you that they're interested, and it's always a maybe. It's rarely a no. That's the vanilla. And there's a lot of vanilla in a tub of butterscotch ice cream. As soon as you get people that are willing to do diligence on you, then you've probably hit a small vein in the butterscotch ice cream. As soon as you get people that want to invest, you hit the intersection of all the veins. And it's a small part of that big tub, but man, when you hit it, the dynamics are completely different. Anybody that's listening to this, and if you're fundraising, if people tell you maybe, they just said no. If people don't want to invest in you, their signs are pretty obvious, right? Or actually, maybe they're not. When people do want to invest in you, their signs are incredibly obvious because they start to mobilize their colleagues around the business. They start to get people to do diligence on you, and then they want to move forward very, very quick, particularly in your smaller rounds. If you're wasting months and months with somebody on a smaller round, they were never interested. Or they were interested, but they couldn't get anybody else in the company to come along for the ride.
Oh, I dig that. I dig. So we don't. I haven't done too much of the raising. Just it's not nature of our business. So I'm always intrigued
Mhm.
by those who do, and always impressed. Especially because I think Vancouver's it's improved a lot, but it's still a
Has
relatively
it?
difficult market to raise in. Well, you know what? I think Toronto's gotten so much better that they're looking. You know, the gravity's kind of pushed into Vancouver a little bit. But the people who did your first round, were they Vancouver based, or at least the people who took
We had
lead?
some
Are they where are they
Vancouver-based
based from?
investors. No, our lead investor was based out of Toronto. It's a company called
In
Scale
Toronto.
Up Ventures.
Oh, okay.
Now they had representation in Vancouver,
Hmm.
and so that actually was sort of the genesis of it. Was actually I knew the heads from Scale Up because one of the partners was on the board at Vision Critical, and I was always presenting to the board in our quarterly board meetings.
Hmm.
So look, the Vancouver investor market is incredibly immature,
Oh yeah.
and there's no other way to say it. It just doesn't have the number of investors. It has a very, very cautious group of investors that look for signals that in the States, quite frankly, they would look for 2 or 3 rounds later.
Mm.
And there's a reason for that too. I think there's less money to go around. The funds tend to be a little bit smaller, so they want to make sure that they're making the best possible bet, because they just don't have the same ability to follow on with the next rounds. And the other reason that Vancouver, frankly, struggles from an investment perspective, we haven't had a ton of exits. Like you go across Vancouver, there's just not a ton of exits. Exits are
That's
where your
that's
investor
that's actually
pools
what I was
come
going to
from.
ask. You need the anchor companies here, and I'm hoping that
Mhm.
you will become one of those anchor companies, so
We're
that
working
then
on it.
we can have a whole new
Mhm.
energized Vancouver scene, founded and funded and fired up by Dooly. Which
Absolutely. I mean,
let's
that's
do
the
that.
goal. The goal for any company in Vancouver shouldn't be to be a big BC company. If you want to become a big BC company, 10 million bucks will put you on the Business of Vancouver Tech 100. You want to become a big company in the
Mm,
Valley, 10 million bucks. That's not even the pizza shop across the street from Apple,
yeah.
right? So you got to think big and you got to be aggressive.
Well, I could not agree more with that. Well, we'll tell you what, we're using big, we're using aggressive, we're using great words here. On your
Mhm.
About Us page, you're listing your key beliefs, and we have things like people and purpose and curiosity
Mhm.
and bold. Where did these come from?
Well, I like to think they came from the people in the company. So we spent a lot of time going through our values and making sure we understood where we wanted to be as a business. I still think it's always going to evolve as the company gets bigger. But when we did our first sprint around people and the personal brand we wanted to create, the top value that came out, and this, by the way, came out in our regular branding sprint as well, was empathy,
Hmm.
and empathy for each other, empathy for the world around you. And we live in Vancouver, which is a beautiful city, but there's a great big homeless population. There's a great big drug population. There's lots of things that could go on my office is hanging out near one of the roughest parts of town, really, in the back alleys and whatnot. And you see all those people, and you see them; they're all people's children, right?
Hmm.
And when you think about it differently, as opposed to I wish that a-hole would stop shooting up in the alley behind my house, and you think about how unfortunate it is that they got to that place in the first place, then you start to think differently, right? So empathy for the world around you, and then empathy for our customers is also a really big part of our story, and that is really how Dooly has always built its product, is focused on creating something that feels really human. So empathy is our biggest one. I would say, curiosity, passion, all of those things, being bold, being courageous, those are all very important values for the business. I would say the one that probably doesn't make it onto the page, but is sort of the all-encompassing part of being at Dooly, is being a bit rebellious, right? It's being a dooligan. That's who we are. We're all dooligans.
Dooligan.
And as a dooligan, we want to infuse that into our brand. We want to infuse that into our users. Our users are signing up and connecting to Salesforce, and that's a bit rebellious, right?
Hmm.
You're saying to your boss, it's like, okay, I've had enough with this piece of crap software that you're making me use. I know everybody needs to use it, but it's really frustrating for me because it doesn't work with my workflow. And so we're asking them to do things that are a little bit edgy, rebellious. Here, connect to the corporate bank account, essentially, right? Now, we've done a lot of things to make our product secure so that they can do that. But still, yeah, it's the Dooligan spirit. We want it to be alive and everything.
Well, I really liked how you defined and you described, that you had these culture sprints. I don't think people that are not in the startup world, I don't think they really understand how important this is. And we like, for example, we did something very similar, but we had to get the hell out of town. So we took the senior execs and we all went to California, just because you can't be in the same place doing the 9 to 5 to come up with this stuff. Yep. And the amount of work that involves something like, oh, just grab it from a book, like it's just open a dictionary and just grab a bunch of words. To define these things is incredible, but also how once you have that defined, it makes the goals that you're going as a team so much easier. Who do you hire? What do they want out of you? What is our product goals? All of these things come out of that simple, well, not simple, but that exercise and the importance of that exercise. Because I remember I once had this one fellow in the very early days of TTT when it was called Two Tall Totems. And he'd done quite a few startups. So British guy living in Seattle. And he told me this is the most exciting time in the business because he wanted to jump on with this. He goes, this is where we start defining culture. I'm like, what the hell do you mean you start defining culture? Like this is something that just happens, I thought. But it took me a while to start realizing that, no, you need to define it. And then you need to like just hug it and go with it. And
you also have to understand that subcultures are going to create themselves as well. Your engineering culture is going to be different from your sales culture. And it's how they interact with each other. That's the culture, right? The engineers in our company, it's all about craftsmanship and making sure that everybody's sort of like leveling up on the quality of their code they're delivering. And so they're really pushing each other on that. That's very different from how our sales and our customer success and our marketing teams think about things. It's not that we're not focused on craftsmanship, but we're focused on it from a different angle.
For sure.
Right. I think the other thing that's really interesting, most people wait way too long to hire people and culture into their company, right? So it's like, oh, HR, who needs HR? HR is just for hiring and firing. No, HR sets the tone.
Yeah.
And it was like the 10th employee that we hired, people and culture.
No, I couldn't agree more. And once you have these things defined, it makes things easier, like as a unit to go forward. So I think that's great. So, you know what, you actually kind of touched on Mobify a little bit. And what's interesting is I actually have Igor Filetsky as our guest next week, which is going to be fun. And they obviously, just sold to Salesforce, and I give them congratulations.
Yep.
Oh, you weren't aware of that? You were aware of that.
No, I'm acknowledging. Yes, they did.
I'm like, I know you had to be aware of that one. So obviously, Salesforce has got, they've got a pretty good position in Vancouver and they're looking to grow. What's your relationship with Salesforce, being that it's so key to your business?
Look, I think that if you look at the way that we interact with Salesforce, we're just trying to make their product more useful in the moment for individual contributors, or maybe make it so that it's less in the way. So our relationship with them is just fine. What they want is people to adopt and leverage and get good reporting and good value out of their product. And if they aren't, then guess what? They're going to cancel. They're going to blame it on Salesforce that, the information wasn't where it needed to be, and they'll switch to Hubspot or they'll switch to Dynamics, and they're all going to give the same outcome. They're all going to give very average information because none of them are thinking along the lines of the user. So we know the Salesforce ventures people very well. We know the Salesforce product management team very well. They're very impressed with our product. They love the way that it works. And in many ways, aspirationally, they would love it if their product worked like that. But when you're dealing with a big monolith, and it is a big monolith, changing the direction of the ship at this stage in the game is really hard. Whereas for us, we can be super nimble. We can just be a nice overlay. What we do for today for Salesforce, you'll be able to do that with Dooly for any enterprise technology in the near future.
Very good. Very good. So we can talk HubSpot after this offline again then. So very good. Very good. Well, you host, or I don't know if it's you or Dooly hosts a segment called Fire Talk for Sales. Do you host that one?
I used to, and then it hurt too much. What do you want to know?
What was the inspiration behind that?
Again, it came back to that whole Dooligan spirit, right? What are we asking people to do? We're asking people to be edgy and to be different. And again, being bold, being different is part of our corporate values. I've always wanted to make sure that the work that I was doing was fun for myself and for those around me. You spend more time at your job than you do with your family. So you better enjoy your time that you have at work. And so we're constantly looking for things that can make it more fun and more interesting. So Fire Talks is basically a show where we bring on sales leaders and people who have like prominent positions in social media around sales and their perspectives. We bring them on the show and we start asking them questions. And every time we ask them a question, they have to eat a hot wing. And the hot wings get hotter and hotter and hotter throughout the entire show. And I mean, in college, we would have done a shot, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing a shot. We're doing a hot wing. So I started this. This was my dream to do this show. It had been for a while, just because I thought we could do something that felt different than your traditional webcast, podcast, whatever you want to call it. And it's, I mean, our impressions are insane. We get like ridiculous numbers of viewers every single week now. And all we're doing is trying to still have a human conversation with somebody around a really interesting and important topic, but we're doing it and making them suffer a little bit too, which is sort of the side effect that's quite funny. I started the show. I did the first few episodes, and I'm Norwegian background. It freaking hurt way too much. So I said to my head of marketing, I'm like, dude, this is all yours, man. You're a great interviewer. Go for it. Have fun. I had one episode where I had bit into a wing, and I can't remember the name of the sauce, but it was so insanely hot. I could feel the bones in my ears vibrating, and it hurt, and I could not make the pain stop. So I realized that I had to punch out. It's funny, you get some people on the show, we'll give them like the hottest one we've ever found. And some of the stuff is like twice the heat of like police grade pepper spray, right? In terms of the Scoville ratings. And people are like, yeah, no problem. And they're just chowing down. You look at them going, how are you doing that?
You can just imagine they would have probably done 15 more shots at that point too.
Totally.
Easily. We're talking this is a little more fun. I want to talk a little bit about SDSS, because I'm intrigued by this link. Do you have any teachers you remember that made a difference for you, or you could tell that that got you on the path of where you are? Share one with me, please.
I got a couple, but I really, really loved my physics teacher, Mr. Havdale. I thought he was just a really genuine and kind person, and very empathetic. I remember one time blacking out in the middle of a test and not being able to answer it. And I was an honors student, and I couldn't even read the page basically. And he's like, no problem, just come in and you can write it tomorrow. Wrote it the next day. But my favorite teacher, I think, from my days in high school, and I actually liked a number of my teachers. Mr. Beaumont, Herr Beaumont. He was awesome. He would come in, he had this big German accent, and he would come in and he would story tell the entire time. You're learning history from him, but he's doing it through stories. I remember him telling us stories about why chlorine gas failed in its first attack, because they went against the Turks, and the Turks thought that it was a genie, and they all ran away from the green gas thinking it was a genie attack. And you're just listening to this stuff, and whether it's bullshit or not, I don't care. Like, I was just like, I'll listen to anything you have to say. He would put on like old World War II hats and stuff.
Well, he was Hitler Youth. He was actual Hitler Youth, which was like, damn, you've lived it. You lived it.
Yeah.
He
would always tell stories about Fritz. Yeah.
Let me tell you one Beaumont story, because honestly, this is what I was going to tell you. Because I guess David had a class with him. Again, my twin brother, David, and I hadn't at the time. And it was snowing, and I was throwing snowballs. And I hear this German accent all of a sudden going, Hobbs, stop throwing snowballs. So I threw another one because, I was pretty good at listening. And then all of a sudden I heard him say, David Hobbs, I told you not to throw snowballs. So I hit him with a snowball and walked away. And David had class with him the next week. Next day, he got thrown into the principal's office. And David the whole time was telling him, I have a twin brother. What are you talking about? He's like, no, that's not true. So from then on, we were just doppelganger Hobbs. Oh, doppelganger, you ball bouncing doppelganger Hobbses. I mean, I used to bump into him still back in the day. And, I'd be hard to believe he'd be at this age now, unfortunately. But he was such a sweet. Me too. Awesome driving his Volvo with shark wings.
Driving his Volvo, and he had people that he hated and he had people that he loved. I still remember There was a guy, Mr. McGuire, it seems that you are not here to listen today. Perhaps you should go and sit in the hallway. And
And I
then,
love the fact,
you
yeah,
know,
no, please.
for me, it was like, Mr. Hartvigsen, it looks like you've had another successful test. Congratulations. Would you like to, blah, blah, blah. It was like, he was always just very, very straight and narrow with his commentary,
Oh
but
yeah.
you knew if he liked you or if he didn't.
Oh,
No
completely,
inflection in
completely.
tone.
No. Well, I love the fact that the only teacher that would ever be allowed to substitute for him was his daughter. Like, this is a
Oh, I
guy
didn't
that
know
had,
that.
oh yeah, it's Hera Beaumont, or whatever the female version of Hera Beaumont is. Okay. Anyhow, I'm so glad it was Hera Beaumont, because
Oh, so
I was going to
funny.
share
He
this.
was
I was
such
going
a
to share this.
great teacher. He was
And
by far my favorite teacher.
I agree. And he claims well, I want to say to this day, but the band 5440, to Awesome Fame, he claimed that he gave them the name. Like, that was his doing. So we'll see if that's true. I don't know. Okay. So Vancouver, I mean, we're doing a lot of really interesting things, and you're on the AI side of really interesting things. But where do you think technology, business, where do you think Vancouver either has a competitive advantage, or will see, something competitive coming out of it in terms of technology, business, any of these things?
There's a couple of things that we realized when President Trump got elected. One is not everybody wants to live in the U.S., right? And we also saw a big exodus. We saw a lot of people from a lot of different countries that wanted to live in Canada as opposed to going to the States. We have a technical advantage because of that. We also have a lot of companies in the States that are actually creating satellite offices in Vancouver. My hope is that that's not the way we go forward, to be honest. I hope that that's just an incubator for talent while we kind of level up our game as a society. I don't want our masthead companies in Vancouver to be the Facebook satellite office and the Salesforce satellite office and whatever else. I want it to be a beacon for great tech talent and great tech companies. We need some exits in order to make that happen. The most likely areas, probably SaaS is pretty high on the list there. We have a pretty hot SaaS community. SaaS you can do from anywhere now, but certainly we have a pretty hot talent pool that's building here. We are a very desirable place to live, so I think that gives us an advantage. I also think that it would be blind to not acknowledge the fact that Vancouver, there's a lot of pot. So I would imagine there'll be some interesting cannabis tech companies that start to scale in Vancouver as well. We've had a bit of a head start in that area for a number of reasons.
Thank you, Tommy Chong.
Yeah, well, people just turn a blind eye for it. I remember way back in the day, people would just turn a blind eye to it. So I think that there's opportunities there for sure. We need the graduates of the previous tech companies to step forward and start doing some cool stuff, right? That's how we're going to build an amazing ecosystem here. It starts small, but you got to be aggressive and you got to work hard to make it into something spectacular. But yeah, we have every opportunity to create, the next few billion-dollar SaaS companies. They can be well distributed, more so now than ever before. I would say it's probably going to be in something in SaaS. I couldn't really give you an honest answer as to what, because I think the whole world is leveling up their game right now.
Oh, completely. Well, here's another question then. So your office, I don't know if you have a satellite office. You're in Vancouver. Is your office? Do you have another office or a sales office, or is it just Vancouver?
No, we only have the Vancouver office, which I pay for every single month, and nobody goes into it right now because of COVID, which is an awesome thing to watch. It's like a paper cut every single month when you actually write the bill or write the check for your rent. So yeah, COVID has really changed the way that we can operate for sure. I have employees in the Ukraine. I have an employee starting in Ireland. I have employees across the US, somebody starting in New York, somebody starting in San Francisco. And then I have a pretty big pool of talent in Vancouver as well.
Oh, very cool. And yeah, I know the bleed right now. Have you been to the latest office on?
I don't think I have. You never invite me.
Anytime. We have 15,000 square feet of unused space. Okay. 15? Premium AAA unused space. Basically, it's a candy store that no one's visiting right now. So I totally
should come
dig
over and
that.
take a peek, because we're gonna blow through the seams of our place pretty soon. So.
Oh, I bet. Well, but my question is this: where? Sure. Well, where do you go next, though? I mean, if you need to get an office, do you go to Toronto? Do you go to San Francisco? Where would you go?
I go to everybody's living room. I think that that's the way of the future, to be honest. I just don't see offices as being required unless you have like, unless you have gravity of talent in an area, in which case you want people to still have 3D interactions, right? The one thing I really have hated about the pandemic, other than the fact that it's killing people and making us all terrified, is the fact that I don't have the opportunity to see people in person. And I am very much a people person, not just saying that like you would in the middle of an interview. I'm a people person. I love being around people. I actually really genuinely love being around people. And so like Zoom and Squadcast and all the rest of the stuff, seeing people in 2 dimensions, frankly, it just sucks. Like, wouldn't this be cool if we were sitting across from each other having this conversation? Totally would, because then I could throw stuff at you.
Perfect. So Kris, what is the toughest thing about being a founder?
Oh, it's interesting that you should ask that, Kris. I would say that it's a lonely job, to be honest. There are a lot of days when you're doing a lot of soul searching to try to figure stuff out, and you don't always have the best answers. And so when you're in a startup, there are days when you're looking at your runway going, oh shit, this is going to be really tight for the next couple of quarters. And that, once you realize that that's part of the roller coaster, you're fine with it, but it is really not, it's really unnerving. So yeah, I think the toughest thing for me is you don't always have a good sounding board inside the business for every one of your problems. And when you're hurting or when you're struggling with stuff, you can't necessarily just lay it all down and share that with your team, because you're trying to keep your team buoyed up as well. I'll give you a really good example. My dad had pancreatic cancer, and he got it very shortly after we raised our funding. That's a pretty lonely island to be dealing with that while trying to run a business and trying to do both concurrently. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out well for Dad. He passed away on September the 4th. But again, when you start to think about like the values that you try to entrench within your business, empathy was one that came out in spades throughout the whole process. Everybody knew what was going on with my dad. I didn't hide it, but I certainly needed to retreat and hold some of it back. We now have something that we've built internally as a result of it. Inside of our product, we have this thing called a doodad. It's like the connector between Dooly and any other application or any other thing within our product. And so we've created a bit of a movement called Doodad Proud, which is something that is very near and dear to me. And again, you can turn that loneliness into something really powerful, which is get everybody involved in it, because everybody has got their stuff. I say this to my wife all the time, everybody's got their shit. Your pile is just different from mine from one day to the next. Everybody's got their good stuff too, right? And so we want to make sure that we're being incredibly empathetic. And wouldn't it be a great thing if we could all do our parents proud through the efforts that we're investing our time in on a daily basis? So yeah, that's a big one.
Well, first off, actually, I did want to tell you that I am sorry about your father's passing. I had witnessed, what you were sharing on social media. We had known each other, and empathy was really a key point of it, because I mean, obviously felt a lot of empathy, sympathy for everyone goes through this, but you did it in a way that really showed the love that you have for your father, and honestly, it touched me. It really did touch me, actually, when you're sharing that. So, and what you also touched on, I mean, it's almost, in terms of all the stuff that's on you, that's outside, and you have to shield your employees from it, because you have to be that leading thing. I mean, I say this to this day. I thank the amazing Mrs. Hobbs, who, is there so I can talk to her. So if you do have challenges, and it's easy to get down in these challenges, make sure you have someone to talk to. And
I 100% agree. And we talk about mental health a lot within the company. And if you're feeling lonely as a leader, think about how lonely it is to be an individual contributor sometimes. I have this really important thing that I hold on to as one of my personal values, which isn't up on the website, which is never forget where you came from.
Completely.
Because everybody had a start point. Now, some people are given the start point, gifted a business, or gifted a lot of money or whatever. But for the majority of people, your start point is right at the very beginning. And if you reflect back to all the mistakes you made and all of the tough parts, you will be able to understand what somebody else is going through, and hopefully not run them over like a bus because you know that you could do it better, think that you could do it better than them.
Completely.
Really being compassionate to where people are going from, and then helping them to get to where you want them to get to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the next stage in life, right? You get very successful with your business, and then you realize that those people who were 10 years ago were you. How do I help them get there? And it's not about, personal gain at that point. It's about what makes you feel better as a member of society.
For sure.
Well, I love that. And you know what? I could say that we had the personal gift growing up of hair Beaumont. That's what we shared right there.
That we did, Mr. Hobbs. That we did.
Now. Excellent. Hey, Kris, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for being part of that today, and best of luck. Sure. And we're going to continue following all the exciting stuff you do, and check back in because I'm excited to see the next stages of Dooly.
Cool, man. Stay healthy.
Definitely will. Okay, you have a great day. Okay.